Alright, what's up everybody? So today I want to go over the jazziest chord in all of jazz. When you play this chord or you play this scale, everything just makes it sound really, really jazzy. This sound is most associated with like 1950s, 60s, even 70s, like detective movies and whatnot. This is your minor major 7 chord and your minor major 7 scale. Now there is another chord scale that is associated with this, which is your minor 6 or your minor 6/9. For all intents and purposes, whenever you see a minor 6 or a minor 6/9, you're going to use the minor major 7 scale. There are a few times when you don't actually do that. Mainly when the minor 6 or the minor 6/9 is the one chord, you use the minor major 7 scale. So what is the minor major 7 scale? It is exactly what it sounds like. It's a minor with a major 7, but it also has the major 6. I like to call this a Dorian major 7. When you actually look at it, how it's spelled in the chord changes, you'll see minor triangle 7. That minor is going to be implied Dorian, Dorian minor, major 7. You have the natural 6. All right, jazz players generally call this melodic minor or the ascending version of melodic minor. But I don't do that because we can use this construct of melodic minor much more efficiently for something else and not necessarily this. And besides, this is a melodic device in classical music. And in jazz, this scale really does function harmonically more than it does melodically. I'm not going to get into that. In this video, I want to give you a few pointers on how to use this scale. So we're going to start with the scale itself. I'm going to do this in concert G minor, but I'm going to talk about it like it's in tenor key A minor. A minor. All right, let's get to it. So here's the scale. When we play a minor 6 or a minor 6/9, we are emphasizing either the root or the ninth. When we have the minor major 7, the major 7 is the point of resolution. And because the major 7 is a half step away from the root, we don't want to emphasize the root when we're playing. We want to treat the root like it's a type of passing tone. Because if we land on the root on the major 7, we get the infamous interval of a flat 9. And this is just not good. It's not the sound of jazz. All right? So minor 6 and minor 6/9, we can emphasize the root or the ninth or the 6th. Minor major 7, we want to definitely make sure that we de-emphasize the root and emphasize the major 7. All right, so here are, I'll give you 3 scales that we can use, that we can think about when we're playing this. And these are going to balance this scale rhythmically. This is a 7-note scale. Let's figure out what notes we can add to the scale that really balance it out and really emphasize the important notes. All right, that really makes it sound like that minor major 7 detective sound type of thing. Okay, the Sir Valor Sax way of approaching all things musical is to use all the notes, right? On this saxophone, I play all the notes. I play notes that ain't even on here, right? You see my YouTube videos and we play an Altissimo, all the notes. So in the same way, we can apply that harmonically. We can play all the notes in the chromatic scale. All the notes not in that scale, we want to use to reinforce the sound of that scale. All right, so before we get to that though, I want to give you some basic bebop scales that we can use for this scale. Okay, so let's start with the most simplistic. This is going to be adding a major 3rd to this scale. All right, so we got A, B, C, C sharp, D, and then we play the rest of the scale. That scale sounds like this. Let's take a closer look at the minor major 7 scale. This scale, like Dorian, does not have any avoid notes. Now, the way I define avoid notes are any note in the scale that destroys the function of the scale. Otherwise, you wind up changing the chord quality of the scale when you stay on that note. So we call them avoid notes. We don't really avoid these notes, but we de-emphasize them. All right, so in your regular major scale, the perfect fourth is the avoid note, because when you play it, you're actually playing a sus chord instead of a major. All right, in Dorian minor, every note you play is okay. None of it changes it from minor to anything else. All right, so when we have our Dorian major 7 scale, or this minor major 7 scale, you don't have any avoid notes. When you have the Dorian major 7 chord, because we are emphasizing the major 7, we want to de-emphasize the root because it's a half step above, and that gives us our interval of a flat 9. You want to avoid that, but we don't necessarily call it an avoid note, the root in that case, because the function of the chord still works. All right, so we can get really creative how we add notes to the scale. We want to make sure that any of the notes that aren't in that scale are going to be de-emphasized. And then we can emphasize any note in that scale because all of it technically works. All right, just remember on the minor major 7, de-emphasize the root. Okay, so bebop scales are going to help us to balance the scale. Here's a bebop scale, adding the sharp 5. Here's a bebop scale where I'm going to add the flat 7, because the flat 7 isn't normally in this scale. But in order for this to work, I need to do something a little different. I'm going to start on the major 7. All right. A good rule is that if you want to emphasize the sound of a major 7, start on the major 7. If you want to emphasize the sound of a minor 9, start on the minor 9. You want to emphasize the sound of a Lydian anything, start on the Lydian note, the sharp 4. Okay, so I'm going to start this on the major 7, and I'm going to use the flat 7 as a chromatic passing tone. This is definitely one of my favorites, and this is the one on this scale that I like to use the most often. Here's starting on the major 7, adding the flat 7 as the bebop note. Okay, with those 3 scales, we covered the major 3rd, the flat 7, the sharp 5. All right, so let's add the flat 5, which is the blue note, and we'll also add the flat 9. So let's start with the flat 5. I want to show you this trick because this scale has almost all the same notes as its equivalent diminished scale. I'm going to play this scale. I'm going to start on the 9th and I'm going to descend. I'm going to first start with the minor major 7 scale descending, and then I'm going to play the diminished scale descending with a whole step. And it has almost all the same notes. Here's the minor major 7 descending from the ninth. Here's the diminished scale. Okay, remember earlier when I talked about melodic minor, which is a scale that's different on the way up than it is on the way down. This is a perfect example of why we should be saving melodic minor to do melodic stuff, because this is a great way to practice this. Instead of practicing your melodic minor the way we learned it in school, we can apply the minor major 7 scale ascending, and then descending, we can play the diminished scale. All right, listen. So I've already been able to use the diminished scale to help reinforce the sound of that minor major 7 scale. Now I want to take the 2 notes that are not in that scale, that are not in the minor major 7 scale, and I want to use them a little more creatively. And it's the sharp 5 and the flat 5. Okay? Beautiful. Okay, here's my favorite way to use a flat 9 in something like this, is to treat it pretty much like you're going to throw in augmented. But I like to use the augmented based off of the 5th, because you still get the major 7 and that major 6 in there. You get the 3rd, you just don't have the root. All right? So listen to this. Piece of cake, man. Okay. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to see more, then you can support the channel by buying me a piece of cake. It's like a Kickstarter, Patreon type of thing, but make a small donation. That goes a long way at helping the channel grow. Also have an affiliate link with Amazon if you want some cool saxophone products that you can pick up on Amazon, reads and whatnot. Also have that. That'll be available in the description box below. And also, I do have my Altissimo books available for alto and tenor saxophone. I have my All Things Diminished books available for all saxophones and all instruments basically. And I do have my newly released and newly most popular Saxophone Sound Development. That is available through PayHip, and there's a link that's in the description below. All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. See ya!